Welcome back, beautiful people. Drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from, because today's story is going to touch your heart in ways you never expected. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness from our past come back to remind us of who we truly are, and this story about Michael Jordan proves that even the greatest athletes never forget the people who were there during their journey. It was just another game night at the United Center in Chicago, or at least that's what everyone thought. The arena hummed with the familiar energy of excitement and anticipation, but in the service corridors beneath the stands, 73-year-old Thaddeus Calloway slowly pushed his walker through the employee entrance, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he showed his special guest pass to the security staff. For 37 years, Thad had kept every newspaper clipping about Michael Jordan, carefully preserved in plastic sheets in his old photo album. He had been there, after all, quietly watching from the shadows of the high school gym as a young Michael Jordan stayed late after practice, shooting hoops until his arms could barely lift the ball. Back then, Thad was just the night janitor, the man who made sure the floors were clean and the basketballs were properly stored away, but he had seen something special in that determined teenager. Tonight was different. After months of gentle persuasion from his wife Octavia and their granddaughter Sage, Thad had finally agreed to attend his first professional basketball game. His doctor, Echo Ravenscroft, had insisted it would be good for his spirits, especially after his recent health challenges. What no one knew was that Thad had been keeping a secret all these years, a small act of kindness that had meant everything to a young basketball player who would become a legend. As Thad made his way through the corridor, leaning heavily on his walker, Soleil Winters from guest services noticed him struggling. She quickly approached, her genuine smile warming the chilly corridor. "Sir, would you like some assistance to your seat? We have a wheelchair service available." Thad politely declined, his pride still strong despite his aging body. "Thank you, young lady, but these old legs still work. They just need a little more time than they used to." In the arena's operations center, Remington Blackwood was reviewing the night's special guest list when something caught his eye. A note from Coach Ambrose Sterling, now long retired, had been attached to Thad's guest pass request. The message was simple but intriguing. This man was there at the beginning. He deserves to be here tonight. Phoenix Durant, the head of security, had been briefed about the special guest but couldn't understand why a former high school janitor warranted such attention. Still, orders were orders, and he made sure his team knew to keep an eye out for the elderly gentleman and ensure his comfort. What none of them knew was the story Thad had never told anyone, not even his beloved wife Octavia. On a cold winter morning in 1979, he had found a young Michael Jordan sitting alone in the gym before sunrise, tears of frustration streaming down his face after being cut from the varsity team. Instead of simply cleaning around him, Thad had put down his mop and sat beside the devastated teenager. "You know," he had said then, his voice gentle but firm, "I've been watching you practice. And let me tell you something, I've cleaned these floors for 20 years, seen hundreds of players come and go, but I've never seen anyone with your fire." Those words, spoken in the quiet of that morning, had formed a bond that would remain unspoken but unbroken for decades. As Thad finally reached his seat in the arena, his granddaughter Sage bouncing excitedly beside him, sports commentator Maximus Rivers was already setting the stage for what seemed like just another regular season game. The energy in the arena was electric, but Thad's eyes were fixed on the court, remembering all those early mornings and late nights when he had watched a young man's determination forge the path to greatness. What happened next would become one of those moments that remind us all that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness are the ones that go unnoticed, and the most powerful connections are the ones that stand the test of time. As Michael Jordan made his way courtside for the pregame ceremonies, his eyes scanned the crowd as they always did. But this time, something made him pause. There, in section 114, row 20, sat a face he hadn't seen in over 40 years, but one he had never forgotten. The man who had believed in him when even he didn't believe in himself, the quiet guardian of those early morning practice sessions who had done so much more than just keep the gym floor clean. The crowd continued their usual pregame chatter, unaware that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Sage noticed her grandfather's hands trembling more than usual, his eyes glistening with unshed tears as he watched Michael Jordan's expression change from recognition to something deeper, remembrance. What happened in the next few moments would leave not just Thad and his family in tears, but everyone in the United Center that night. Sometimes the greatest stories aren't about the moments that make headlines, but about the quiet acts of kindness that echo through the years, waiting for the perfect moment to remind us all of our shared humanity. In the operations center, Remington Blackwood watched the scene unfold on his monitors, suddenly understanding why Coach Sterling's note had carried such weight. He quickly radioed Phoenix Durant, sensing that something unprecedented was about to happen. "Keep all cameras on Section 114, he instructed, his voice carrying an urgency he couldn't quite explain. Soleil Winters, who had helped Thad earlier, stood at her post near his section, watching as the greatest basketball player of all time seemed to freeze in place, his eyes locked on the elderly man with the walker. She had seen countless celebrities and special moments in her years at the arena, but something told her this was different. As the pregame music pounded through the speakers and the crowd roared with excitement, a story 40 years in the making was about to remind everyone in attendance that sometimes the biggest moments in life start with the smallest acts of kindness. And for Thaddeus Calloway, the night janitor who had once sat beside a heartbroken teenager and shared words of encouragement that would echo through decades, this was just the beginning. The question wasn't whether Michael Jordan would remember, it was what he would do next. And as the greatest basketball player of all time began to move with purpose towards Section 114, everyone was about to learn that true greatness isn't just about what you achieve, but about remembering those who helped you achieve it. Have you ever had someone believe in you when you needed it most? Drop a comment below and let us know, because this story is about to show us all that sometimes the smallest moments can have the biggest impact, and that kindness, no matter how long ago it was given, never truly fades away. The United Center had seen countless memorable moments over the years, but what happened next would become a story told for generations. As Michael Jordan moved purposefully through the crowd, the usual pregame chaos seemed to fade into the background. Security personnel, led by Phoenix Durant, scrambled to clear a path, though they weren't quite sure why their most famous guest was deviating from the usual protocol. Up in Section 114, Thaddeus Calloway's hands gripped his walker tighter, his weathered fingers turning white at the knuckles. Beside him, his granddaughter Sage watched in wide-eyed amazement as her grandfather's stories about the young basketball player he once knew suddenly collided with the legend approaching their seats. Octavia, who had heard snippets of these stories over their 45 years of marriage, reached for her husband's arm, feeling him tremble with emotion. Maximus Rivers, the veteran sports commentator, sensed something unusual unfolding. His practiced voice carried across the airwaves as he narrated what seemed like an unscripted moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, something extraordinary is happening right now. Michael Jordan appears to be making his way to Section 114, and while we're not sure why, there's clearly a purpose in his steps." In the operations center, Remington Blackwood was frantically searching through the guest list information, trying to piece together the significance of what was unfolding. The note from Coach Ambrose Sterling suddenly made more sense, but it was clear there was a deeper story here. He quickly radioed Soleil Winters, who was still stationed near Section 114. "Whatever's about to happen, make sure every camera catches it." As Jordan approached, time seemed to slow down. The memories flooded back, not just for Thad, but for Michael as well. That morning in 1979 had been more than just a moment of kindness. It had been a turning point that neither man had ever forgotten. The words Thad had spoken then echoed through the decades. "I've never seen anyone with your fire." But there was more to the story, details that Thad had kept to himself all these years. After that morning, he had made sure the gym was always open early, always warm, always ready for the young man who wouldn't give up on his dream. He had quietly kept extra basketballs properly inflated, fixed the loose floorboards without being asked, and made sure the lights would accidentally stay on late when he knew Michael was practicing. Michael reached row 20, and the crowd around them began to realize something special was happening. Phones came out to record the moment, but this wasn't about social media or viral videos. This was about something much more profound. As the greatest basketball player of all time stood before the elderly janitor who had once shown him kindness, the usual celebrity-fan dynamic dissolved into something far more human. "Mr. Calloway, Michael's voice was soft but carried the weight of decades of gratitude. "I've been hoping to see you again." The simple greeting brought tears to Thad's eyes, but it was what happened next that would leave everyone in the arena speechless. Michael Jordan, in front of thousands of witnesses, knelt down beside Thad's seat. "You know," he began, his voice carrying emotion rarely seen from the famously competitive athlete, "I never got to thank you properly. Not just for that morning, but for everything after. You thought I didn't notice, but I did. Every morning the gym was warm, every night the lights stayed on, every loose board that got fixed, I noticed it all." Octavia squeezed her husband's hand as tears rolled down his cheeks. All these years he had never told anyone about those small acts of kindness, never sought recognition or reward. He had simply done what he felt was right, supporting a young man's dream in the only ways he could. Dr. Echo Ravenscroft, watching from nearby, saw her patient transform before her eyes. The physical ailments that had been weighing him down seemed to lift as years of unspoken emotion finally found their voice. This was more than just a reunion, it was a healing moment. The story took another turn when Michael reached into his jacket and pulled out something that made Thad's breath catch, a photograph, worn and creased, clearly carried for many years. It showed a young Michael Jordan in the high school gym, and in the background, barely visible but unmistakable, was Thad with his mop and bucket. "I've carried this with me to every championship game," Michael revealed, his voice thick with emotion. "Because success isn't just about talent or practice, it's about the people who believe in you when you don't believe in yourself. And you, Mr. Calloway, you believed in me before anyone else did." In the operations center, Remington Blackwood was receiving calls from major networks wanting to know the story behind what was unfolding. Coach Ambrose Sterling, watching from home, smiled knowingly. He had always wondered about the immaculate gym and the mysteriously accommodating schedule that had allowed his young player to practice at all hours. Phoenix Durant, who had initially been concerned about the security implications of this unplanned moment, now stood back in respectful silence. In his years of managing arena security, he had never seen anything quite like this, a moment where status and celebrity gave way to genuine human connection. Sage, watching her grandfather with new eyes, began to understand why he had kept all those newspaper clippings, why he had followed every game, every championship, every milestone. It wasn't just about basketball, it was about seeing the seed of greatness he had helped nurture grow into something extraordinary. The crowd in the United Center had fallen silent, sensing they were witnessing something rare and precious. Soleil Winters, who had helped Thad earlier, found herself wiping away tears as she watched the scene unfold. This wasn't in any protocol or procedure manual, but it was perhaps the most important moment she had ever facilitated. Michael wasn't finished. With the photograph still in his hand, he turned to address the crowd, but his words were really for one person. "Success leaves clues," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed arena, "but sometimes those clues aren't in the spotlight. Sometimes they're in the quiet moments, in the small acts of kindness that nobody sees. Mr. Calloway taught me that greatness isn't just about what you do when everyone's watching, it's about what you do when you think nobody is." The impact of this moment rippled through the arena. Parents hugged their children tighter, friends exchanged knowing looks, and strangers found themselves sharing tissues. This wasn't just about a basketball legend and a former janitor, it was about all the unsung heroes in everyone's lives, all the small acts of kindness that shape destinies. Maximus Rivers, for once, found himself struggling to find the right words to capture what was happening. How do you describe a moment when one of the greatest athletes in history kneels in humility before someone who had shown him kindness decades ago? How do you narrate the power of gratitude and the enduring impact of simple human decency? As the evening continued to unfold, it became clear that this wasn't just a reunion, it was a reminder of the profound impact we can have on each other's lives, often without realizing it. And for everyone watching, whether in person or through the countless videos that would soon circulate worldwide, it was a lesson in the power of kindness, the importance of recognition, and the truth that greatness often begins with someone simply believing in you. The question wasn't just about what would happen next, it was about how this moment would change everyone who witnessed it. Because sometimes the greatest stories aren't about the achievements we celebrate, but about the moments of kindness that make those achievements possible. If you've ever had someone believe in you, someone who supported your dreams with quiet acts of kindness, share your story in the comments below. Because tonight, in the United Center, Michael Jordan showed us all that true greatness never forgets its roots, and that sometimes the biggest heroes are the ones working quietly behind the scenes. What happened next at the United Center would transform a moment of personal gratitude into something much larger, touching lives far beyond the arena's walls. As Michael Jordan continued to kneel beside Thaddeus Callaway's seat, the real story behind their connection began to emerge, revealing layers of impact that had shaped not just a basketball career, but countless lives over 4 decades. Remington Blackwood, watching from the operations center, had already received calls from every major network in the country. But what caught his attention wasn't the media frenzy. It was the way the crowd had transformed from spectators into witnesses of something profound. The usual pregame energy had shifted into a reverent hush, broken only by the sound of sniffling and the quiet murmur of people sharing their own stories of unsung heroes in their lives. Michael reached into his jacket again, this time pulling out an envelope. "Mr. Callaway," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the now silent arena, "that morning wasn't the only time you changed my life. Every night when I stayed late, practicing my shots, you were there. I used to think you were just doing your job, but now I know better. You were watching over me, weren't you?" Thad's voice trembled as he responded, speaking publicly about these memories for the first time. "The lights didn't stay on by themselves, son," he said with a gentle smile. "And somebody had to make sure you got home safe all those nights." This revelation caused Octavia to gasp softly. All those years, her husband had worked late shifts, coming home well past midnight, and she had never known the real reason why. Now, watching him with Michael Jordan, she understood that her husband had been more than just a janitor. He had been a guardian angel to a young man with a dream. Sage, filming everything on her phone, suddenly remembered all the stories her grandfather had told her about hard work and dedication. "Sometimes," he would say, "the greatest victory isn't in the winning, it's in the preparation nobody sees." Now she understood he hadn't been speaking in generalities. He had witnessed this truth firsthand. Michael opened the envelope, revealing a document that made Thad's eyes widen. "This," Michael announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, "is the deed to a new youth center in your old neighborhood. But it's not going to be called the Michael Jordan Youth Center, it's going to be called the Thaddeus Callaway Center for Youth Development." The crowd erupted in applause, but Michael wasn't finished. "And that's not all. We're creating a scholarship fund in your name, the Callaway Custodial Scholarship. Because you taught me that sometimes the most important people in our lives are the ones working behind the scenes, the ones who show up early, stay late, and never ask for recognition." Dr. Echo Ravenscroft, watching her patient's reaction, saw something remarkable happening. The physical transformation was visible. Thad sat straighter, his hands steady for the first time in months, his eyes bright with purpose rather than clouded with age. This moment wasn't just about recognition, it was about validation of a life lived in service to others. Phoenix Durant, the security supervisor, found himself remembering all the maintenance staff and custodians he'd worked with over the years. How many of them, he wondered, had their own stories of quiet impact? How many had changed lives without ever knowing it? He made a mental note to learn their names, to see them differently from now on. The story took another turn when Coach Ambrose Sterling, who had been watching from home, called Remington Blackwood with an urgent message. The coach had found his old logbooks, which told another part of the story. Every morning when young Michael arrived to practice, the gym had already been heated, no small feat in Chicago winters. The coach had always assumed the heating system was automated, but now he knew the truth. Soleil Winters, still at her post near section 114, noticed something extraordinary happening in the crowd. People weren't just watching anymore, they were sharing their own stories with each other. A woman talked about a school bus driver who had given her confidence when she was a shy child. A man remembered the cafeteria worker who had secretly paid for his lunch when his family couldn't afford it. Maximus Rivers, the veteran commentator, found himself telling a story he had never shared before. "You know," his voice carried across the broadcast, thick with emotion, "I had my own Mr. Callaway. A janitor at my first radio station who used to let me practice my broadcasting late at night when no one else was around. We all have someone like this in our stories, someone who believed in us before we believed in ourselves. Michael Jordan stood up, but he wasn't done honoring the man who had played such a crucial role in his journey. The Callaway Center, he announced, will have one special feature. In the main gym, we're installing a special window, a window that looks into the custodian's office. Because I want every kid who practices there to see and remember that sometimes their biggest supporters are watching from the shadows, cheering them on without saying a word. Thad tried to speak, but emotion overwhelmed him. Octavia squeezed his hand, understanding flowing between them. All those extra hours, all those late nights, they hadn't just been about a job. They had been about believing in someone, about supporting a dream in the only way he could. The impact of this moment continued to spread. Social media was flooded with hashtags like #ThankYourCallaway and #UnsungHeroes, as people worldwide began sharing stories of the quiet champions in their own lives. But more importantly, something was shifting in the arena itself, a recognition that greatness isn't just about individual achievement, but about the network of support that makes it possible. Sage, still recording everything, caught a beautiful moment when her grandfather finally found his voice. "I never did it for recognition," Thad said, his words carrying clearly in the hushed arena. "I did it because I saw something in you, Michael, something that reminded me of every young person who just needs someone to believe in them." Michael nodded, understanding perfectly. "And that's exactly why we're doing this, Mr. Callaway. Because your story needs to be told. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's another custodian staying late, another teacher working extra hours, another person doing what needs to be done not for glory, but because they believe in someone's dream." The scholarship announcement had another layer that brought fresh tears to everyone's eyes. It would specifically support students working as custodians or in other service roles while pursuing their education. Because sometimes, Michael explained, the people cleaning the classrooms have just as much to teach us as the ones leading them. Dr. Echo Ravenscroft made a note in her phone. She would need to update Thad's medical records to include this evening's remarkable impact on his physical and emotional well-being. Sometimes, she realized, the best medicine isn't prescribed in a bottle but comes in moments of recognition and gratitude. As the evening continued to unfold, it became clear that this wasn't just about Michael Jordan and Thaddeus Callaway anymore. It had become a movement, a reminder that behind every success story, there are countless unsung heroes who contribute in ways that often go unnoticed but never unappreciated. The United Center had witnessed many historic moments, but this one was different. This wasn't about points scored or games won. It was about the power of gratitude, the importance of recognition, and the truth that sometimes the biggest impacts come from the smallest acts of kindness. As Michael prepared to make one final announcement, the question wasn't just about what would happen next. It was about how this moment would continue to ripple outward, touching lives and changing perspectives long after the game was over. Share this video if you believe in the power of everyday heroes, and tell us about your own Mr. Callaway in the comments below. Because tonight, Michael Jordan reminded us all that true greatness isn't just about what you achieve, it's about remembering and honoring those who helped you achieve it. 1 month after that unforgettable night at the United Center, the impact of Michael Jordan's recognition of Thaddeus Callaway had grown far beyond anything anyone could have imagined. On a bright morning in Chicago, a crowd gathered outside a renovated building in Thad's old neighborhood, where the new Thaddeus Callaway Center for Youth Development was about to open its doors for the first time. Thad sat in the front row, his walker now replaced by a sleek black cane, a gift from Michael Jordan, complete with the Jumpman logo in gold. Dr. Echo Ravenscroft had noted in her medical records what she called the gratitude effect. Her patient's health had improved dramatically since that night, as if decades of silent service had finally found their voice and brought healing with them. Beside him, Octavia held his hand, just as she had done for 45 years of marriage. But now she understood something deeper about the man she had married. Those late nights hadn't just been about a job, they had been about nurturing potential, about believing in dreams, about the kind of love that asks nothing in return but gives everything it can. Michael Jordan stood at the podium, but he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a line of custodians, maintenance workers, and service staff from schools and sports facilities across the city. Each wore a badge that read, Dream Keeper, a new recognition program that had sprung from that emotional night at the United Center. "A month ago," Michael began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd, "we celebrated one man's impact on my life. But what happened that night sparked something bigger than any of us expected. In the past 30 days, we've received over 1 million stories from around the world, stories of the unsung heroes who shape lives every day without recognition or reward." Remington Blackwood, who had coordinated the arena's response that night, had been promoted to head a new community outreach division. The footage from that evening had become a training video for customer service staff across the country, teaching that every interaction, no matter how small, has the potential to change a life. Phoenix Durant had implemented a new security protocol at the arena, one that included learning the names and stories of every service staff member. Because, as he put it, you never know which one of them might be somebody's Mr. Calloway. Sage Calloway, now running a popular social media account dedicated to sharing stories of everyday heroes, smiled as she filmed her grandfather's reaction. The hashtag #ThankYourCalloway had generated millions of posts, each one a testament to the power of quiet kindness and unwavering support. The youth center itself was a marvel of thoughtful design. Just as Michael had promised, the main gym featured a special window looking into the custodian's office. But there was more. The walls were lined with photographs of service staff from across decades of sports history, each with their own story of impact and influence. Soleil Winters had been promoted to lead a new mentorship program at the arena, pairing young employees with veteran staff members. The program was called The Calloway Connection, emphasizing the importance of those quiet moments of guidance and support that can shape a career and change a life. Coach Ambrose Sterling, now serving as an advisor to the center, had helped develop a unique curriculum that went beyond basketball. The Calloway Principles, as they were called, taught young athletes to look beyond the spotlight, to recognize the network of support that makes success possible, and to understand that greatness often begins with gratitude. As Michael continued his speech, he revealed something that brought fresh tears to Thad's eyes. The NBA has unanimously voted to create the Thaddeus Calloway Service Award, to be given annually to someone in professional basketball who exemplifies the spirit of selfless support and unwavering dedication to others' dreams. But the biggest surprise came when Michael turned to address Thad directly. "Mr. Calloway, that morning when you found me crying in the gym, you didn't just give me words of encouragement. You gave me a vision of who I could become. And now, it's my turn to do the same for others." He unveiled a large screen showing live video feeds from 50 other locations across the country. At each site, another youth center was being dedicated, each one named after a local unsung hero who had changed lives through quiet service and unwavering support. Dr. Echo Ravenscroft watched as her patient stood up, stronger than he had been in years, to address the crowd. Thad's voice, clear and strong, carried a lifetime of wisdom. "I never sought recognition," he began, "because that's not why we do what we do. We do it because every young person deserves someone in their corner, someone who sees their potential, someone who keeps the lights on when everyone else has gone home." The crowd erupted in applause, but Thad wasn't finished. "But I've learned something this past month. Sometimes letting your story be told isn't about seeking glory, it's about showing others that their quiet acts of kindness matter more than they know." Maximus Rivers, covering the event for national television, found himself drawing parallels between sports and life. "In basketball," he commented, "we celebrate the shots that go in. But today we're celebrating the people who sweep the court, who keep the lights on, who make those shots possible. And isn't that what life is really about?" The Calloway Custodial Scholarship had already received thousands of applications, each one telling a story of someone working behind the scenes while pursuing their dreams. The selection committee, led by Octavia Calloway herself, had been moved to tears by the essays they received. As the ceremony continued, something beautiful happened in the crowd. People began standing up, one by one, to thank the unsung heroes in their own lives. A businessman thanked the janitor who had encouraged him to keep studying. A doctor thanked the cafeteria worker who had fed her when she was a hungry medical student. A teacher thanked the bus driver who had given her confidence when she was a shy child. The moment grew beyond the ceremony, beyond Chicago, beyond sports. It became a reminder that greatness isn't just about individual achievement, it's about the network of support, the quiet champions, the people who believe in us when we don't believe in ourselves. Michael's final announcement brought everything full circle. Starting today, he declared, every NBA arena will have a Callaway Corner, a special section reserved for service staff and their families. Because they're not just maintaining our facilities, they're maintaining our dreams. As the doors of the youth center opened for the first time, Thad stood with Michael Jordan on one side and his family on the other. They watched as young people poured in, each one passing under a sign that read, "Remember, someone is always watching, someone is always believing in you, someone is always keeping the lights on for your dreams." The impact of that night at the United Center had grown into something far greater than a moment of recognition between a basketball legend and a former janitor. It had become a movement, a reminder that every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change a life. And as Thad Callaway watched the young people entering the center that bore his name, he understood that his legacy wouldn't just be about the young man he had helped become Michael Jordan. It would be about all the future Mr. Callaways who would learn from his example, who would understand that sometimes the greatest act of love is simply being there, believing, supporting, keeping the lights on for someone else's dreams. Share this video if you believe in the power of everyday heroes, and tell us about the unsung champions in your own life. Because as Michael Jordan and Thaddeus Callaway showed us all, true greatness isn't just about the heights we reach, it's about lifting others up along the way.